Hey Black, how are you?
Hello, hello. Good evening. Sorry, I'm a bit late. How are you doing? How are
No
you, Mike?
problem, sir. How are you doing today?
Very good. Happy birthday, Georgie, I should say, before we
Thank
move on.
you.
Yeah.
Thank you so
Yeah, happy birthday. I thought I saw that on Instagram. Yeah, it's great.
much. Thank you. Thank you guys. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
So this is FM Black. Mike is here. Mike, this is FM
Perfect.
Black, as you can
Perfect.
remember.
Hello.
Hi, you're a veteran of our series now.
I
Season 3 and you're
I
back
guess
this week.
so.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, I'm ready if you are. Can you hear me? All right.
Yeah, all
Cool.
good here.
Okay, brilliant. Georgie, you can hear us, yeah? You're recording
Yeah,
it.
all good to go.
Bro, okay. All right. We'll do that pause, the famous pause, and then we'll start the episode. Hello and welcome to Season 3 of Georgie's Stripping the Dipping podcast. I'm your host F1 Blag and welcome back. So we start the season with a returning guest. Mike Ogren is a professional racing driver and driver coach based out of Florida in the US. He and I had such a great chat that we decided to split it over 2 episodes. So this week in part 1, we hear from Mike about the success he had last season, his plans for 2024, and how much it costs to go racing. So without further ado, I started by asking Mike how he's getting on.
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me. I didn't fully realize I was the first guest of 2024. Yeah.
Yeah, so we had a YouTube live last week with Colin
Okay.
Queen, who's an up-and-coming
Yeah.
American driver in essentially the equivalent to British F3. But,
Yeah.
I'm counting this as the first recorded podcast for sure.
I'll take it. Well, like you said, happy to be back for another recording. Happy New Year to everyone, and yeah, excited to be here.
Well, brilliant. Great to have you, Mike. And, if your YouTube and your Instagram are anything to go by, there's a heck of a lot to catch up on, even though you were with us on YouTube Live about 10 months ago. So before we jump in, to new listeners, could you introduce yourself? Who's Mike Ogren?
For sure. So, yeah, my name's Mike Ogren. I live in Florida, in Southeast United States. For all our global listeners here, I do a lot of racing myself, road course racing, mostly sports cars, touring cars, and I do a lot of driver instruction, driver coaching, whether that's team driver programs or all the way up through professional race driver coaching. I was Skip Barber's pro team coach in SRO this past year. I coach a lot of personal clients as well, and basically find any reason or excuse I can to be at a racetrack. My favorite track is Sebring, which is where I just happened to be this past weekend. So it's been a busy and good stretch since I talked with you guys last.
A victorious return to Sebring, as if the internet's anything to go by. But we'll
Yep,
jump
yep.
into that in a minute. Yeah, congrats. I mean, what more have you got to do in 2024? But before we jump in, we could see that you had a couple of stories on Instagram covering your Christmas, and so I wanted to hear how your Christmas break went, and also you've got a tradition of making a Christmas lasagna. Is that right?
Yeah, you're very attentive.
Aha.
So yeah, for me, I had a really nice kind of holiday break. It was oddly quiet. So like I said, I live in Florida, and usually uh, there's a lot of testing that goes on in the southern United States because it's very cold up north. But didn't have too many track weekends or track events this winter yet. At least it's about to pick up. But very quiet December and kind of into the last couple weeks for me. So really nice to be able to relax a little bit, spend some time at home, which is difficult to come by in the profession that I happen to be lucky enough to work in. And yeah, got to spend some time with family. We have a lot of both my wife and my family all live in kind of the same area now, so that's made the holidays get-togethers much simpler. And yeah, as you alluded to, so my wife and I have been vegetarian for 6, maybe 7 years now, and we've made a lasagna, a vegetarian lasagna that we made last year, and we made kind of two batches, a vegetarian one and a non-vegetarian one, kind of more traditional. And our whole family really liked the vegetarian one, so they asked us, "Hey, can you make that again?" And we have decided to make that kind of our family tradition. And of course, we have to record a time lapse every time we do it now. So
Yeah, well, it's almost up there with the "It's not Christmas until Mario Andretti's done the tweet." So we'll look out for that next year as well. Yeah, fantastic.
perfect.
Yeah. Well, before we talk about 2024, and again, maybe I have been too attentive on your Instagram. I saw a post of you basically sat at a table with, I don't know, like 6 or 7 trophies, a hoodie that said champion. So before we even talk about last weekend and what's in store, how was your 2023 after we spoke to you?
Yeah, so it was really good. So I race predominantly last year. I raced in SCCA, so Sports Car Club of America, the Hoosier Super Tour kind of national series, which culminates in the SCCA National Championship runoffs, which was held at VIR, Virginia International Raceway, this past year. And I don't remember exactly what point in the season we spoke last, but I'll kind of just go through the whole year last year and some of those trophies you referenced. Basically, we went to 3 Super Tour events, and I won. There's 2 races at each of those events. We won 4 of the 6 races and finished second in another, and I believe 7th in the other one after a bit of a mechanical issue. And that was good enough, combined with a 5th place finish at the national championship runoffs, good enough to win the 2023 Hoosier Super Tour in my class H production, which is great. Very, very exciting, super cool. But our goal was to go try to win runoffs, which again, for if you're less familiar, is kind of the pinnacle of SCCA road racing. A lot of history at some great tracks across the United States. It used to be at like Road Atlanta. It's been at Sonoma, the VIR the past couple of years, going to Road America this year. So a lot of very, very famous tracks, a lot of history. And we were going to try to win. And unfortunately, we came in 5th, which, on the face of it is a pretty decent result. Top 5 out of, I think we had like 28 starters in my class, something like that. But we, like I said, given the season that we had, our expectations were pretty high. So being a little bit disappointed with 5th place in the national championship runoffs is, I think, maybe a good problem to have. But yeah, overall on the year, yeah, won the Super Tour in our class, and 5th place at runoffs. That was kind of the very brief summary of 23. So a nice pile of trophies, a really nice hoodie actually from Hoosier. I got to give them a shout out for the quality of the jacket there, which doesn't seem like much, but something I'll actually wear, which isn't, you can't always say about some of the knickknacks you get from racing. So yeah, that was 2023, my racing in a nutshell.
Well, yeah, shout out to Hoosier, and yeah, congratulations on what sounds like a fantastic season. And if kind of racing drivers have something in common, those that we've interviewed on the show, while of course they can be happy with their achievements, they're all still ruminating over the race that got away. So it is maybe a sign of greatness that you're like, I've got all these trophies, I've got this hoodie, but that 5th place, I want to improve on that for this season. So yeah,
That's right.
Good luck.
Yeah, thank you.
So before we talk about 2024, so H production class for the uninitiated among us, including myself, what does that mean?
Yeah, good question. So there are, I believe now 28 different classes within SCCA, so Sports Car Club of America, which to those less familiar is kind of the maybe most prominent amateur racing organization in the United States. Now, you get up to the Super Tour level and the runoffs level that we've kind of been talking about, and you get to sometimes a very kind of pro level of preparation, of driver quality, that kind of thing. So it's maybe SCCA's closest to pro racing that they get to outside of maybe Trans Am, that kind of thing. So really, really high level stuff. But the classing is really interesting. I would argue that there are probably too many classes now. It's 28, and if you have to explain what class you're in, that probably means there's too many. But H production is a there's three different production classes now. There's E, F, and H production. The E being the fastest, F in the middle, and then H being the slowest of lap time between the three classes. Fairly high level of prep, meaning you can modify the car pretty significantly compared to maybe another class that'd be similar as a touring class, so T1, 2, 3, and 4. Less modifications allowed. In the production classes, we have a engine like compression ratio limit, so that's how they limit power. You can adjust, custom pistons, camshaft, a lot of engine internals, along with traditional suspension components. You can modify suspension components. Pickup points have to be stock, but pretty high level of modification. And then the H production class in particular, I find fascinating because we run an old Volkswagen Scirocco, so 1987 Volkswagen Scirocco, kind of a rare car, late 80s Volkswagen hatchback, and we run at 2,100 pounds, which is basically the heaviest car in the class, which seems insane these days. So at 2,100 pounds, we are, so you got late 80s hatchbacks, maybe Hondas of the similar vintage, so Honda Civics, CRX, that kind of vehicle. Some more modern cars that are maybe kind of similar, Toyota Yaris, Mazda 2, that type of thing. And then a bunch of old British roadsters, so Triumph Spitfire, Bug-Eye Sprite, that type of car that runs significantly lighter, much lighter weight. So the way that we make our lap time versus, say, a Bug-Eye Sprite is very, very different. And it makes for, I think, incredibly entertaining racing where, the cornering speed of one of these little British cars is incredibly high. But then, a car like mine will have a bit of a horsepower advantage down the straightaways.
The different sort of dynamics, closing speeds, I think that must be fascinating to watch. I just had to put, because, I'm unfortunately of the generation in the UK that has forgotten the imperial system. I converted it into kilograms. It's nearly 1,000 kilograms, or 952.
Yeah,
or 150
I was gonna
stone
give
or something.
I was gonna give a kilogram ballpark, but I didn't want to embarrass myself, so I figured you could probably carry me on that. So thank you. Yeah, a pretty light car, right? Maybe just under 1,000 kilograms. That's pretty light by today's standards. And we're one of the heaviest cars in the class. So we're running against, like I said, these little British cars that are maybe as light as 1,500 pounds. So what, maybe 600-700 kilograms.
Wow.
It's a pretty significant difference in minimum weights. And again, I imagine many people are familiar, but minimum weight is a pretty common way to equalize cars. A lighter car is going to do everything better than a heavier car. It'll accelerate better, it'll brake better, and it'll corner better because there's less car to move. So when you've got 300 kilogram difference from the lightest to the heaviest, you're assuming that there's a lot of other variables that allow those cars to be pretty even.
Yeah, and as you were saying, the heavier the car, going back to my sort of high school physics, the more the more force that's involved in slowing it down, and I suppose the more force involved in accelerating it out of the corner. So as you say, when you're racing those light British roadsters, presumably what they can, I don't know, are their brakes as good or maybe not? I don't know. Like where do you see them closing up on you, and where do you close up on them?
Yeah, so under braking for sure. So they may not have more braking power. They probably even run maybe smaller brakes than a car like mine would, because they're much lighter. But they can brake so much later, partly because they're not going as fast on the straightaway and because their cornering speed is so much higher. So if I have to, maybe I'm going, let's say 100 miles an hour, and my minimum speed for a corner coming up is, let's say 50 miles an hour. Again, very simple. And I realize I'm in the American system here, so bear with me.
It's okay.
Just
We
simple
still use
numbers.
miles per hour. We give us a decade, we'll have forgotten that too. But
Okay,
yes.
all right, yeah. So say we're going 100 of whatever unit you like, and you have to slow down to 50 for the corner. Well, a British car, one of these little Spitfires or something, maybe they only got up to 95, but they can take this upcoming corner at 55. Well, now they only have to decelerate 40, right? Whereas I have to decelerate 50 miles per hour. So they can brake much later. and shorter to be able to achieve that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes a heck of a lot of sense. And I mean, I could just imagine that could lead to, because look, I must admit, road cars, sports cars, I'm playing catch up on Dens. Dens knows what he's talking about. For me, I came into motorsport from watching a Formula One, right? So all the cars are
Yeah,
built to
yeah.
a specification. They're all the same, pretty much. And so already you're thinking about the crashing occurring from driver etiquette.
Sure.
Who wins the corner? If you're up the inside, if you've got half a car length, then the outside driver might give way, for example. But then when you've got these, you're like, I don't think that sounds right. But look,
Yeah, we can talk more about that.
Let's talk about that. Yeah,
if time allows.
no, absolutely. But then if you factor in the fact that cars will have a different minimum speed at the apex, or cars will be braking later or earlier, it must make it really hard to call mid-corner or on entry at braking point, etc., what the etiquette should be. Like, how does that affect the racing?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, it's a very good observation. I mean, you can see it at, say, sports car racing at the highest level. IMSA or WEC, that type of thing, where you have prototype cars. Of course, this is different classes, but you have prototype cars and GT cars that have vastly different, top speeds and braking points and apex speeds. It's kind of a similar concept, even though that's mixed class racing, and I'm talking about even within the same class. Um, there is certainly a level of etiquette that you have to assume, or that's required, or whatever, to be able to all coexist in a way that's not going to lead to car damage or potentially worse. It's takes a lot more, I'd say, awareness, and accept. You also have to accept that the way that these cars making speed is very different. Okay, if a car that weighs 200 kilograms less than me is able to outbrake me and outcorner me, well, there's a good chance I'm just going to be able to pass him again on the next straightaway. So I think there's a little bit more acceptance of kind of a give and take. Whereas in, say, Formula One, for example, there's well, if this guy passes me, I'm never going to get him back or something because my tires are degrading, or whatever the case may be. So I think there's a little bit more acceptance of that back and forth, if that makes sense.
So, I mean, often the kind of the crashes in, say, Formula One tend to happen because there's a recognition among the drivers that overtaking is difficult. So you've got to force it, or you've got to block it. Otherwise, that's your chance gone. You're going to be stuck behind that car and so on. Yeah.
Look, it's not easy. And I'm not saying that, at the most competitive levels, there's not certainly an element of protecting a corner or driving defensively or something like that. But I'd say that sports car racing, especially across different platforms, requires a lot more kind of long-term vision of when that's appropriate and when it's not. And I think you see that in Formula One sometimes, where you have, let's say, maybe a car that's out of position, like Kevin Magnussen qualifies on pole in the rain, right? And then the race starts. Well, Haas probably knows that they're not really fighting for the podium. They're going to be happy with points probably. So when Max Verstappen comes up, Magnussen's probably not going to fight that move as hard as he would, say, I don't know, an AlphaTauri or something like that, where they're fighting for points. And I think that's kind of the mindset that I'm talking about, of kind of picking your battles and knowing when to fight and when to maybe be a little bit more beneficial for all parties. It's not going to benefit Kevin Magnussen to drive defensively and lose maybe a second, 2 seconds over the course of a lap to fight off an inevitable pass. Whereas maybe he can keep a Williams, an AlphaTauri, an Alfa Romeo behind him for the rest of the race, and that's going to pay off for him.
No, it makes a heck of a lot of sense. And if I was going to throw shade, I would use the example of Lando Norris every time he's in front of Max Verstappen in a Grand Prix. But I forget I said that. I'm not going to say that. At time of recording, I think McLaren were the first team to release their livery for 2024. So we'll obviously in future episodes we'll compare the liveries and compare chances. So talking of 2024, and we'll definitely get into
Mhm.
racing etiquette later when we talk a bit about driver coaching. So what, you had an outing this weekend, and if
Yep.
my attentiveness is anything to go by, it was quite successful. So yeah, where were you and what were you up to?
Yep. So we kind of hinted at it already. So the first round of 2024 SCCA Hoosier Super Tour was at Sebring, my home track. A few hours away from where I live. So pretty easy to get to. Pretty hard one for us to miss. Um, and yeah, we had a great weekend. So we swept both races in my class. First qualified first. Pretty easily won both of our races. Um, Sunday was a rain race as well as qualifying. It was a pretty ugly weekend all in all. Only one really dry session, and that was our first race on Saturday. Um, so yeah, again, our car. So going back to kind of some of those car differences, our car is front wheel drive, um, which tends to be more beneficial in the wet. So we had very, very good pace in the rain. I love racing in the rain, and yeah, came away with a couple of trophies on the weekend and a good start to 2024 for sure.
Fantastic, and yeah, as you say, a great start. So, where do you go to next? When's the next race, and where is it that you're going to be attending?
That is an excellent question, and I don't know currently. We don't really have. I don't have my schedule as nailed down from a racing perspective as I'd like at this point of the year, which is good and bad. I've got a decent amount of coaching opportunities lined up, so I'll be at racetracks, but maybe not driving myself over the next couple of months so much. Um, and I'm not exactly sure what we're doing. So the runoffs, like I said, national championship runoffs last year was at VIR, Virginia International Raceway, which I live in Florida, so that was maybe not so far, halfway up the East Coast. This year is at Road America, which is up in Wisconsin, so in the Midwest part of the United States, very very far from where I live. So I'm not certain if we're going to pursue kind of the full SCCA, high level season. Of course, I'm always working on other opportunities to go racing in maybe IMSA, SRO, that kind of thing. Um, so very long answer to your question is I don't know when my next race is going to be on this particular day.
So, I suppose we have to kind of keep our eyes peeled, and all will
That's right.
become revealed in due course.
That's right. I'll know when I'm at a racetrack with a helmet on in a car is probably when I'll know the next time I'll be at a track with a helmet on in a race car. But of course, I try to be good about sharing on social media,
Yeah.
and to those attentive folks like yourself, it sounds like that's pretty. It's been pretty clear. So
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I was going to dive into some news, but while we're on the topic, you kind of you've had a great season last year. Obviously, you were thinking about only got fifth in the runoff, quote unquote, only. A good problem to have, as you described it. Um,
yeah.
how do you balance? Because clearly, you want to be driving at the highest level you can, but it costs more, presumably, the higher you go. How do you balance
Mhm.
that? Like, for example, doing another season at the same level and sweeping it, or being even more successful than you were the year before, is that something you would entertain, or are you thinking, well, yeah, I could do that, but it still costs money, I may as well go for something slightly more challenging? Like, what is the calculus in your head at the moment?
Yeah, no, you nailed it right on the head, and I think a lot of people don't have as good of a grasp of the financials of racing. Maybe even outside of course, Formula One. I think is pretty obviously ludicrously expensive, and the teams spend all kinds of money and that kind of thing. But even fairly low level, maybe amateur level, entry level racing is not what I would call cheap. It's a fairly difficult sport to get into. Um, Unfortunately, I wish it was much more accessible. There's just uh, at the bare minimum, you're going through fuel, brakes, tires, things that are not terribly cheap. And then you have entry fees that go into any sort of race, whatever organization you're racing with, of course, has to rent the facility and organize the event and whatever it is. So you owe them some money, not to mention whatever car you're going to drive, whether you own your own car or you rent it from a prep shop or that type of thing. It gets very expensive very quickly. And you alluded to it quite well. The balance of, doing things your own. And I have, a lot of help, a lot more help than a lot of people do, from, some sponsors I do a lot of work myself. I'm fortunate that my dad is a mechanic, so I have access to his shop, and he does a lot of the work on the car, helping make it go faster and all that kind of stuff. I'm actually recording this from the office at the shop right now, so I'm way luckier than a lot of people in that regard, from a cost and accessibility standpoint. And it's still pretty difficult. So then the question becomes, okay, well, what can we try to push and do more, what quote unquote pro level racing, SRO, IMSA, that kind of thing, which I love. I love racing in front of fans and all of that. I've had the good fortune to be able to do that a good number of times. But that gets even more expensive, right? Now there's higher entry fees, maybe more expensive cars, that type of thing, where sponsorship comes into play, or are you going to be involved with a team that wants you to drive for them? And that's maybe part of the reason I also don't know exactly when my next time at a track will be, because I'm part of the game of any driver, coach, or kind of pro level driver is you're hoping for a phone call or whatever that says, hey, can you be at Sebring next weekend? I need a guy to co-drive with me, or my client or something like that. So that's the whole game, and it's very complicated. But again, good problems to have for sure.
I can hear that it is complicated, and it's intriguing to me because when you talk about clients as well, I guess you've got to be entrepreneurial and creative in the way that you find these drives. And if you're coaching other drivers, that's a huge network that you're building, and perhaps one of them will give you a ring and go, no, I remember you were a fantastic coach. Perhaps you can, as you say, co-drive, or you'll be at the track because you're coaching someone.
Yeah, exactly. And I think, for those that are maybe less familiar with sports car racing, that's very often what you see, even at the highest levels of sports car racing. There's often kind of what you call a pro-am nature to it, where maybe one driver in a car is a successful businessman, and has always wanted to go racing, and now has the funds to do so. And they end up hiring a driver coach, and they co-drive with them, partly to, of course, be competitive and successful, but it also makes that maybe non-professional driver better, because they have video and data to compare to, and someone coaching them to get better and closer to the level of a professional type driver. So that's very often what you see, even at very high levels of again, I say quote unquote professional racing for exactly that reason. There's often drivers in the car that are maybe not always what we would think of as a pro driver, whereas but there is at least one pro in that driver lineup usually.
No, it makes a lot of sense, and I suppose, I don't know, those of us that have a benefit from a positive upbringing are probably told by our parents, you should never talk about religion, politics, or money. And I promise I'm not going to talk to you about religion or politics, but on the money side, could you give our listeners like an order of magnitude? Because, for example, I was at university, we did go-karting like in the national sort of university series. And I remember, because that is the cheapest it can be, you had a Club 100 specification go-kart. So these were maintained by the series. You basically paid £100. This is about 15 years ago. I'm aging myself, to compete in, or maybe 180 quid, but like to compete in a couple of races. That is obviously a lot cheaper than having your own car, paying for your own fuel, your tires, registration fees, licenses, and so on and so forth. Without, I don't want you to do an IRS declaration on, live.
No, sure.
What sort of order of magnitude are we talking about to go racing for a season, let's say?
Sure. So let's say just this past weekend at Sebring, this is all kind of public information, so I'm not gonna tell you anything that's too close to my heart or revealing or
Yeah.
anything like that. But entry fees for the Super Tour event was $770. Um, let's see, a brand new set of tires, which I was not running on because I had some from last year, but a brand new set of the tires that I race on is just over maybe 1,000, maybe $1,200 for a set of tires. Which again, I'm fortunate enough that we don't have to buy a new set every event. Where again, compared to say Formula One, they're on a new set every 20 laps. Um, so you're at $2,000 in entry fees and tires. Um, Brakes are maybe a few $100 for new pads all around the car. Um, Fuel, I spent, let's see, $300 in gas for the race car alone, just to get through the Sebring event. So you're at, let's see, that's what, about 2,400 US dollars, without considering any transit to the track or from the track. We have an RV, so we stayed right in our RV. That's without staying, at a hotel, something like that, and doing all the prep work ourselves and owning the car ourselves. So you're at just over $2,000 just to participate in the event and pay for your consumables at the amateur level. I would say at the professional level, the expectation, usually the way that professional racing works in say SRO or IMSA, is because the expenses become so much higher. Um, the amount of the order of magnitude of kind of the whole operation goes up, right? So you see, these big haulers that haul two, three, four cars, and they've got these big tents and canopies, and you know, instead of two, three people working on a car, you've got 10 to 20 people on a team working on multiple cars and co-drivers and all this stuff. And the entry fees are higher. The cars are more expensive. Therefore, to say rent a car would be more expensive. The tires are more expensive. The fuel, it's more competitive. So you need, every last, you're spending more on tires so that you can be more competitive with fresh tires, that kind of thing. And I'd say to rent, say, I don't know, an IMSA or SRO touring car is maybe add a zero to the number we were talking about before. So 20,000 plus US, and that'd be probably on the low end. If you had sufficient qualifications, relatively fast driver, and you wanted to rent from, a team that can put a competitive, reliably fast car on the grid at one of these pro events, you're talking 20 plus $1,000 for one race weekend.
Wow.
Yeah.
And
So
that,
that's where the
yeah.
go ahead, sorry.
No, go, please.
No, so then, the whole conversation becomes about sponsors and co-drivers and all these things where it starts to make a lot more sense. Why sponsorship is such a thing. You look at, say, NASCAR, for example, maybe much more prominent in, of course, in the US than elsewhere. And the sponsorship there, it's well talked about there. But you see the same thing in, say, IndyCar, Formula One. I think McLaren, you referenced earlier, very good example of a team that, again, order of magnitude there is significantly higher. You're talking hundreds of millions of dollars for a season. But they're chasing sponsors just like someone like me is, right? To help offset those costs or pay for those costs, even though there's prize money, even though they are McLaren, which is this huge organization. So it's an expensive game, man, but there's nothing like it.
No, I can imagine it's sort of your there's money in, and then there's kind of adrenaline out, in terms of
Mm-hmm.
the transaction. It must be incredibly challenging. The thing that I've never, I don't know, us Brits, we try to be polite. Maybe we're a bit reserved. If you're going to be harsh, you might call us cold, or emotionally detached. Fine.
Okay.
But like the sponsorship angle, I've never quite understood in any major sport, like, what is the sponsor trying to achieve from sponsoring a car? And what would you say you can offer sponsors if you say, okay, come and sponsor me for this season in SCCA? Like, what is the appeal for sponsors to put themselves in, as a partner of yourself?
Sure. Well, I appreciate the platform to pitch myself here, but no, I think it's grown a lot. And the reason I reference NASCAR is because I think that's what a lot of people think of when you hear, oh, sponsor a race car. Okay, you think of I don't know, there's a lot of alcohol and cigarettes and stuff on the hood of a car, 20
Mm.
years ago, something like that. But I think it's become a lot more than that, right? Like if you have a logo on a car, you are at an SCCA race, for example. It's open to spectators, but not exactly a spectator event. You're not getting 100,000 people that are going to see your brand or whatever it is. And we were live streamed. There's actually really good live stream coverage of my racing this past weekend. But again, you're talking 10, 20,000 people watching throughout the day, which is a good number. But it's not massive, compared to, I don't know, putting an ad on television or the radio or something like that. Um, so then it becomes much more a game of storytelling. I think there's a couple angles. One is, okay, storytelling through, say, social media, or say you're a brand that has energy drinks. Maybe a really good example. I think Red Bull is a perfect example of, okay, there's a lot of energy drinks on the market. They all, whatever, people like their own flavor. They have their own favorite for whatever reason, but they all kind of do, or say they do, or taste. They're all kind of in the same ballpark, right? So how do you differentiate that? Well, we're the best Formula One team in the world, and we do all these awesome things. Okay, that's starting to make sense. It helps from a storytelling perspective. And now a Red Bull can use all of the video, all of the pictures, all of the all of the things that go with Formula One. Obviously, an extreme example, but they can use that to market their brand. Whereas for me, conversations I've had with companies, with sponsors, is, hey, I can you have rights to maybe the pictures or the videos that we use or that we post, where now you can see, oh, okay, hey, we're company X that does Y, and instead of just marketing about our doodad or whatever, hey, look how fun we are. We have we work with this guy who's races at a racetrack, and isn't that cool? And, oh, hey, Mike, do you want to come in and, like, bring your car and talk to our employees and have an engagement there? Oh, we can bring employees or customers or clients out to the racetrack and get a kind of behind the scenes experience of, okay, someone explained it to me well from a sponsorship thing of, there's not, if you're a racing fan, you have any interest in racing cars, there's nothing like being at a racetrack. Um, so bringing out, say, a company and some of their clients, well, some deals can get made maybe on the side of the racetrack because everyone's in a good mood, they're enjoying what they're doing, having a good time, that kind of thing. You can do giveaways, hey, company X, buy a Red Bull, get a chance to win, behind the scenes tour with, Mike Ogren at the racetrack, and see what they do at the track for the weekend. Uh, all those kinds of things, and it depends on the brand. I'd say more automotive focused brands, sometimes are easier, sometimes more difficult. But you can talk about, say, a kind of an affirmation angle, right? Okay, you sell, I don't know, let's say wheels, right? And you sell these awesome wheels, and you want people to think they're really good. Well, what better way to make people think that they're fast and they look good than to put them on a race car at a racetrack, and to show people, hey, these are proven on a racetrack. This guy believes in them, uses them to race on his car. That should be more than good enough for you to put on your street car that's just going to go to Cars and Coffee or something like that. So there's a lot of different angles depending on what each company needs or wants, that is well outside of the kind of traditional mindset of, well, I'm going to pay you a bunch of money to put my logo on your car, right?
Yeah, although, my simple mind still thinks that car liveries look cool, and there are certain
Oh, a
ones.
hundred percent.
Yeah,
A
exactly.
hundred percent. Don't get me wrong. I don't think that that's ever not part of the ball
Yeah,
game, but
yeah.
I think that that's kind of just the
The
starting
start.
point.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
No, of course. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I think it feels like being a racing driver, professional racing driver, you have to kind of almost be like someone that's great at driving, check. Someone that could do logistics of getting to the circuit with the right stuff, your consumables as you called it, etc. check.
Mhm.
You've got to be a businessman, check. There's all sorts of things that I guess I think you're an engineer by background. Have you found that business side come easy to you, or is it something you've picked up along the way?
Yeah, it's a good question. And yeah, so I went to university for mechanical engineering, and I spent 6 years at Nissan as a design engineer in the chassis department. So tires, wheels, brakes, suspension components, that kind of thing. Which I think, kind of a side note here, was very helpful for me in kind of both directions. Like having the racing background was helpful for me in that role, and then having the engineering experience has also been very helpful for me in the racing world. Um, but to answer your question, I think the business side is I've gotten better at it, and I'm very fortunate that my wife has a marketing background and has actually has been involved in motorsports marketing herself through some different agencies, from BMW Motorsport to actually the Ferrari Formula One partnership with Shell. She was involved with that, and we can talk more about that. Pretty cool. But she's kind of helped me, understand how to approach a lot of the things that I was talking about from a sponsorship and partnership angle, which is difficult for me, to be honest. I'm kind of a reserved, maybe quieter person by nature. Um, so having to, whether it's for driving or sponsorship or driver coaching, it's a little bit out of my character to just cold walk up to someone and say, "Hey, I can help you go faster," or "Hey, you know, your business would be a good fit to give me money." That is naturally difficult for me. So I think framing it in a way that's not, what I just said, "Hey, I want you to give me money." It's more, "Hey, I think we would be good partners, and here's why." That's really helped, honestly, my own personal mindset, of how to even start those conversations.
Yeah, that's a huge shout. I mean, I wonder you must have British ancestry of you've got that level of reservedness. But yeah, like thinking not about you're asking someone for a favor, but that you bring value
Mhm.
to the transaction, and that it's a win-win
Yeah,
for both
exactly.
sides. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. Well, so you mentioned because it sounds like you're part of a power couple here. So your wife has been involved in the Ferrari Shell partnership. I mean, how does someone
Yeah.
based in Florida get involved in that? Is it like a US based sort of marketing firm? Like how does that even happen?
Yeah, so the there's a bunch of, marketing agencies all around the world, that, uh, you know, uh kind of let's say, manage the relationships between a company and another company or a partner or whatever it is. So in this case, she's worked for a few different marketing agencies. I forget uh, exactly which one it is, and the agency would probably be upset with me if they ever heard me say that. But whatever. She's not there anymore, so I don't owe them anything. But the agency that controls the relationship between Ferrari F1 and Shell was doing, uh, basically, for the Miami Grand Prix. They wanted to do, some events and a photo shoot, and they filmed a like YouTube short video, that kind of thing. And my wife was very involved in that. It was kind of the team that she was on was in the marketing world, and she has become an expert in, kind of motorsports marketing, partly through myself, but also from her own personal interests. Um, so she was at, this Shell. I'll try to be friendly to the British listeners, the petrol station there,
Oh, look at that.
and see, I'm trying. And they had
Translation.
Charles.
Amazing. Sorry.
Yeah, yeah. So they had Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz come to the Shell station, and a bunch of, Ferrari F40s and F50s, and all these really cool cars, and they filmed, uh, a YouTube. I believe it's a YouTube video. You can probably go look it up. And she was, part of the management of that event and the relationship, and all of that. So she's got some pretty cool behind the scenes stuff with Leclerc and Sainz and the cars and the team and all that stuff. So.
I think I remember that. Were they wearing the kind of clothes of someone that works at a petrol station? Like I can't. I swear that that's what I remember. Yeah, fantastic. I mean, so she's
Yeah,
met.
and this was in.
Go, go.
No, I was gonna say this was, so not this past year, it was the
The
previous year, so
original.
20. Yeah, the first Miami Grand Prix. So that
Yeah.
was another reason is we live in Florida, so not so far. We're not close to Miami, but much closer than most. Um, so we're kind of naturally a good fit to go kind of scout out the hotel that the Shell folks are going to stay at, and find a good Shell station that's going to be a good filming opportunity. Right? There's a bunch of fuel stations around, but is this one clean? Is it modern? Does it look nice? Is it not so busy so that we can actually film a dozen Ferraris and two pretty famous guys, without getting too interrupted, that kind of thing. That's kind of the nuance of the boots on the ground approach that she got to be a part of.
No, amazing. I think I found the advert. It might be wrong, but
Okay.
it's on YouTube. I think someone has clipped it, F1 Now, and it says best Ferrari slash Shell ad ever. And you're right. There's like
Mm.
Ferrari I don't know. Is that an F50, F40? I don't know. I'm really bad at sports cars. Basically, they're pulling into the Shell station, and then you've got pieces to camera from both drivers. Yeah, fantastic.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
Amazing. Well, it's amazing to be involved in that, no doubt. Maybe those guys need a bit of coaching. Who knows? You might be able to.
Hey, it's funny you say that. Again, another tangent is,
Hmm.
I think for all of us to like just understand how difficult racing is, especially at the highest levels, right? We actually, a friend of mine, a fellow instructor, uses Carlos Sainz's pole lap from Circuit of the Americas. I don't even know what year it was, within the last few years, though, maybe 2021, something like that. This is the pole winning lap, final round Q3. Carlos Sainz, one of the best drivers in the world. Soft tires, everything it's got, and he makes more than one like pretty obvious mistakes in the video. Um, just the entire like turn one. He goes up to turn one at Coda, which if you know, is just this big uphill, kind of blind, fairly difficult, slow corner, and he misses the apex by like 2 feet. On the first corner of the lap, and it's fascinating to see that. That again, best drivers in the world with the best equipment, pushing for every single thousandth of a second, still make mistakes, but maybe, of course, made up for that elsewhere in other places around the track. So,
Yeah, I guess because the saying goes that it's kind of a sport about millimeters and so on. But
hmm
I suppose at those speeds, and with that level of difficulty, it could be that everyone is operating, and struggling because the conditions and so on, and that happened to be the best possible lap,
yeah,
at that moment. So, well, obviously it was. You got
exactly.
pole. Yeah.
Exactly. I think that one of the things that I like to say about racing, or anyone in motorsports, is like there's never been a perfect lap. Like last year we set a track record when we went to Sebring a year ago, today or whatever it was. And there was more on the table there, right? Like it's a good lap. I watch it. I'm like, yeah, this is moving pretty good. But the goal is always to beat that, right? It's like, oh, I could have been on throttle, just a blink of an eye sooner in this corner, or I could have braked 2 feet later in this corner, or whatever it is. There's no such thing as a perfect lap, and I think that mindset is kind of, as you said earlier, similar to the never good enough mentality.
Yeah, I mean, so long as you're not beating yourself up about it, and
Yeah. Sure.
you've got the lap record. I mean, come on, be happy. No,
That's right. That's right.
so before we talk about racing etiquette, because we did say we'd get to that, and you are obviously a professional driver coach as well. Before we do that, I was really intrigued when you were talking about running on either fresh tires or, oh well, I've got some tires from last season, but they've got some miles left in them with enough performance.
Yeah.
Do you find that affects the way you approach? Let's say you've got a race. Are you
hmm
thinking about tire life, and not just absolutely rinsing your tires, or does that cross your mind?
Yeah, absolutely. So it depends on a lot of variables. One, what tire are you running on? Two, what are the track conditions? Three, uh, what are the cars you're racing against? Let's say. And those are kind of the main things. So, the first thing is, again, I rate the car that I race in SCCA racing. We run on Hoosier slick tires, and it's a front wheel drive car, so it's going to use the front tires significantly more than the rear tires. So because you're asking them to not only turn and slow the car down, but you're also asking them to accelerate the car. Whereas a rear wheel drive car should have a little bit more even tire wear, because you're separating the duties between the front and the rear of the car. Now, the second thing, like I said, is I'm sorry, the Hoosier tire is fastest, brand new. I'd say, I've yet to see a tire that's brand new. But after, let's say, 20 minutes or 40 minutes or whatever, it doesn't just completely fall off. You're not going to lose, let's say, 10 seconds of lap time, and you're still going to have plenty of rubber left, to physically, not be dangerous to drive on. And then, I think kind of what else I was saying is the competitiveness, how, who am I racing against here, right? Do I need every last tenth of a second, or can I maybe afford to run on a set of tires that has had some life taken out of them, and still be competitive enough to do what I need to do? And that's kind of what we had this past weekend, to be perfectly honest. Our we're, the way the car was doing this weekend, the way that we were going was good enough that we didn't feel like we needed to put brand new tires on to win our race, and that was the case. And it's also important to note that we run sprint races, so maybe 20, 30, 40 minute races where you're not thinking so much, even in Formula One, let alone say an endurance race, Le Mans, 12 hours of Sebring, that kind of thing, where you need to worry about the tire lasting 2 hours at a time or something like that. We're running maybe 20, 30, 40 minutes at a time, and those tires will last, I don't know, 6 to 10 cycles of that duration, before you kind of run out of rubber or the tire starts to slow down. Now, different tires have significantly different characteristics. I think Formula One, you can see very clearly, those tires are kind of designed to degrade, and the differences between the soft, the medium, the hard, that kind of thing is how, not only when they start to degrade, but how quickly they fall off a cliff, right? The hards, for example, will start to slow down a little bit, but not dramatically. Whereas the softs, once they fall off, they're often multiple seconds a lap slower, and there's kind of no coming back from that. Very different than kind of the tire characteristics that I had this weekend, for example.
That's really interesting, and I don't know, like if it was me, because I'm the sort of guy that hates spending money. And so, for example, when we go on holiday, my wife has to book the holiday, and I kind of make it a habit not to know how much it costs, because it will ruin my holiday. I'll be thinking, oh, I better have another drink. I better eat another meal, because, got to get my value. Have you got in the back of your mind, like, oh, well, I've got some brakes. No, these sets of brakes have got another race in them. These tires over here. Like, have you got that sort of inventory in your brain somewhere, or is it written down, I guess?
Yeah, and that's part of it.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, we already talked about, the tires that I run on cost over $1,000 for a set. So, okay, well, if I can take a little bit less life out of them and still win the race, well, unless I'm really, really trying to, let's say, set a lap record, something like that, there's not a whole lot of incentive to try to push for every last tenth on every single lap. Because that's one, taking life out of the tires, the brakes, all this type of thing. And also adding risk, right? Like by driving at, let's say, 95%, of course, I'm being nicer to those consumables, but I'm also introducing less risk to crash the car or whatever. Whereas if I'm, trying to drive, get every last tenth out of the car, I'm harder on all of those things, but also introducing more risk for really no reason.
Sense, and I think they said this about Alan Prost. He was trying to win the race at the sort of slowest possible speed.
That's right. Yeah, it's actually a quote that we talked about this weekend. Okay, win the race by going as slow as possible. And I think you saw that with like Max Verstappen. This year, nobody's going to catch him in a lot of these races, right? So you could see he's having a chat, figuring out what he wants to do for dinner, trying to give his engineers a heart attack by joking about there being an issue with the car, something like that. But you look at his lap times and they're, within, I don't know, half a second over an entire stint.
Mm.
And that's what pays off. Okay, can you run the same lap time, keep the car underneath you, manage any issues that that might come up? And that's another thing. We were fighting some clutch issues this past weekend. I had a little bit of clutch slip. So yet another reason. Okay, it's an issue to manage. I'm not going to set a track record because the car is not performing quite at 100%. I've got the race, pretty well in hand from a position standpoint. There's no need to push 10 tenths all the time.
No, absolutely. And I suppose that, we go full circle. We were talking earlier about sort of racecraft, race etiquette, when you're also paying
Sure.
the bills on the car. Perhaps you're thinking, you're not necessarily thinking about that in the exact second, but it will affect your level of aggression, I suppose.
Yeah,
Mid-corner.
and it's interesting. I'd say that kind of goes both ways, right? Because if let's say you, as the racing gets more expensive, instead of racing your own car, that's I don't know, 10, 20, $30,000, something like that. As most, I'd say, kind of personal street-based cars are similar to mine. Okay, cool. You've got a sponsored ride in, let's say, I don't know, a GT4 car, right? Well, that GT4 car costs, I don't know, $250,000, $300,000, and the level of driver, talent is pretty high throughout most GT4 racing at, let's say, IMSA, SRO, that kind of thing. Okay, congratulations, you're driving for free. Well, what's your contract say if you try to make a pass and it didn't really pan out and you destroyed the car, or any sort of damage, right? A front bumper on a, let's say, I don't know, Porsche GT4 car is like not cheap. So how does that all work? So I'd say it's interesting, kind of like you said, oh well, I've got to fix this car. Well, okay, if it's not my car, do I have to pay for it? Obviously the Formula One guys, maybe not the case. But most levels below that, there's at least some conversation about who's paying, and how aggressive you do want to be based on the status of the team, or are you the pro driver? Are you not? Are you, what exactly is the situation? But I think that goes back to making smart choices and choosing. Of course, you have to be aggressive sometimes in racing, but choosing when is, I'd say, a very, very difficult skill to master.
So that's where we'll leave things for part 1. Don't forget to come back next week for part 2. And to give you a little sneak peek, we cover Formula One predictions for 2024, and Mike gives his opinion as a professional driver coach on wheel-to-wheel racecraft in Formula One. But until then, I've been your host F1 Blag. Don't forget to follow us at Strip the Dip on all social media. Until next time, goodbye.